Please allow me to say the following. Excellencies, Honorable Assistant Minister, DGs, distinguished guests. I am Yemsra Chasafa, Director of the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IATI. It's a pleasure, an absolute honor for me to welcome you in person here in this very important meeting. And I also wanted to acknowledge very many participants online present today in this very important side event, which is entitled on Data-Enabled Development Cooperation. I express my sincere gratitude to the government of Australia, to the government of Germany, to the government of Liberia, who kindly agreed to host this side event with us. It's an honor again to acknowledge our guest of honors and excellencies, Honorable Mr. James Larson, Australian Ambassador, His Excellency, and Permanent Representative to the United Nations. I wanted to acknowledge also Honorable Mrs. Sarah Mulbach, Assistant Minister of Budget from the Ministry of Finance, Development Planning, and Government of Liberia. I also wish to acknowledge Dr. Tony Swan, Director from the Development Economic Section at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade at the Government of Australia. And I want to also duly acknowledge Mr. Dirk Mayer, Director General from the Ministry of Development, Policy Transformation and Climate Division at the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Development of Germany. Thank you, sir. And I also wanted to acknowledge colleagues who joined us today, Genevieve Teodorsky, economist from the World Bank, my friend Katrin Frauscher, Deputy Executive Director at the Open Contracting Partnerships. You're all most welcome as distinguished speakers to us in this very important side event. I know we are starting the side event slightly later than we imagined, and I also am consciously aware that time is very tight in side events, which are really during lunchtime. So without any further ado, allow me to give the floor to the Honorable Assistant Minister Sarah to give us our opening remark to proceed in this side event. Madam, the floor is yours.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, and friends. It is a privilege to welcome you today as we gather to discuss an urgent and increasing informative issue in international cooperation, the power of data in development cooperation. We meet today at a defining moment. The global landscape changes from day to day, economically, politically, and socially. Nations, both developing and developed, are facing unprecedented fiscal constraints and climate vulnerabilities and evolving geopolitical complexity. Yet, despite the challenges, we are also witnessing a powerful transformation. The growing ability to harness data to strengthen policy decision, improve financial planning, and increase the impact of international cooperation. In Liberia and across many developing nations, the role of data has never been more vital. While the real-world impact the financial flows have on health systems, education, infrastructure, and livelihood growth, they are more diverse, complex, and interconnected than ever before. Decision makers, government, civil society, and private sectors need the right tools to make informed decisions that drive sustainable development. Ultimately, we are talking about ensuring that international commitments translate into tangible progress, that every dollar, euro, or yen that is allocated for particular development outcomes is tracked, measured, and optimized for greater possible impact. The role of data and our reliance on data are so important that we don't give a second thought when the numbers and ratios are being cited from various sources. But for the social, economic, financial management, and resource allocation decisions that either depend or influence by data have to have the intended development outcomes. We should be intentional and deliberate about the obvious and not so obvious nexus between two realms of data. One realm is populated by composite of data set that inform our decision, and the other by another composite of data sets that foreshadow the intended outcome. For countries like Liberia, for instance, we rely on data for a variety of reasons and for policy decisions. The fiscal and macroeconomic adjustments that must be made to stay on track with extended programs like the IMF supported extended credit facility program depends on accurate economic and fiscal and monetary data. We need comprehensive and reliable data to forecast resource flows from domestic resource mobilization efforts and external assistance. National development plan like our recently launched Arrest Agenda for Inclusive Development, which is the AAID, with multi-layers of national and subnational indicators developed with general support of the United Nations country team and other development partners, relied heavily on data of all types and sources. Data will be critical in monitoring and responding to the implementation successes and challenges. This includes data on resource flow, annual implementation targets, and any adjustments decisions that might be made to keep the plan on track during the 2025 to 2029 framework. As I speak, in Liberian financial management and development space, we've been forced by the external variety to face the shock reality of the critical significance of data in decision-making that has national and international dimensions. In response to the recent suspension of the United States official development assistance, we have launched an in-depth analysis of the potential impact of this decision. The analysis covers potential direct and indirect tax losses from USAID and its contractors and subcontractors. We are also studying the impact of health education, democracy and governance, and economic growth. We are also analyzing how the government could be compelled by necessity to make extra budgetary responses in these sectors. That is why today's discussion is so essential. To tackle humanity's most urgent challenges, we need to rebuild trust in the development system. Transparency is fundamental. We have an opportunity to take bold steps forward, a future where data is not just a passive tool, but an active drive of international cooperation and accountability. Liberia is proud today to serve as a pioneer of part of this effort. We are the first country in the world to use the international aid transparency data on an ongoing basis now for 8 other of our larger donor partners. After careful validation, using the Liberia Project dashboard, we integrated this open data into our nation budget and development planning systems, ensuring that our development partners and citizens alike have a clear, accessible, and transparent understanding of where resources are going and how they've been used. We are also using this data to sharpen our focus on results, both from improving the performance of ongoing projects and ensuring meaningful alignment with our new National Development Plan, the AAID. ETA has played a crucial role in this and globally by making trillions of dollars in development financing open and accessible, doing that financial commitment led to real impact on ground, and we thank them for conveying this discussion today. We commend our co-host Australia and Germany for this leadership and commitment to strengthen data system and financing frameworks. We also recognize the vital contributions of the World Bank and the Open Contracting Partnership, as well as ETA, who continue to provide the transparency and interoperability we need to strengthen our global financial system. This is a moment for bold actions. Rebuilding trust in international institutions is imperative. By fostering transparency and accountability, we can reinforce confidence in global development efforts and create a system that is truly responsible to the needs of those we serve. We must challenge ourselves to think beyond the conventional, to push for innovations that will allow us to bridge gaps in monitoring, reduce inefficiency, and promote true accountability and international financing. We must ensure that discussions at the conference do not remain confined to policy recommendations, but translate into concrete commitments and action that enhance the effectiveness of financial cooperation and rebuild trust within and across nations, the lifeblood of international cooperation. Through this discussion, we'll hear examples of both practical about how open data standards and transparency are enabling sustainable development impact. And I believe the conversation on how to integrate these principles into the safe outcome document we are working towards through this 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. Liberia stands ready to collaborate, to share experiences, and to learn from these exchanges and discussions. I look forward to hearing from all of you here today, friends and colleagues in this room, and in bringing those critical principles into the hearts of financing and development agenda. Thank you, and I look forward to dynamic and productive discussions ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Sarah Mulbah. Honorable Assistant Minister, thank you very much. Truly appreciate the opening remark you provided, and really underscoring the importance of data in decision making and for development effectiveness. And I appreciate the point you've made related to the fact that we're really in a time where we really need to strengthen data-enabled development, decision-making, as well as transparency of aid. We truly appreciate, Madam, and thank you for the best wishes. I hope all online participants present are able to listen to us. Please do let us know if you have any challenges online. We have quite a significant number of people attending this event online, and I'm delighted to say now that we have reached to the much more awaited substantive part of our side event. It will be moderated, but no other than our very good UN colleague, Joseph Barnes. He's the chief for monitoring at UNICEF. He will be taking over from here to take us through the entire section up to the end of the discussions. Joseph, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and greetings, colleagues, greetings, friends. Thank you very much, Yemi, and I really appreciated, I guess, the opening remarks on the emphasis on decision making. As Yemi says, my name is Joseph Barnes. I lead the monitoring function in UNICEF, and obviously getting the right data in the right hands at the right time is key to decisions. So this is a very important conversation for us. UNICEF takes transparency very, very seriously. We're proud to be in the top 10 performers of the Aid Transparency Index year after year, and we're proud to sit on the board of IATI and the fantastic work that IATI is doing. And like many entities, we have an open data portal where you can see all of our finance data and all of our results data. And I wanted to emphasize that results word because that's also key for us. Results, in the case of UNICEF, for every child, because children are the future of all of our countries. So transparency, UNICEF sits in our program effectiveness team, where we think about focus, so where we need to work, scale, what works, and impact, how do we know when it's worked. And data is key to all of that. But finance data is also key to all of that, because without the right finance, we can't get to those results. So finance coordinated through strong national systems, and is absolutely essential to that. And that requires open data standards that we can all come around and entities like UNICEF can use. So on that note, it's really my very great pleasure. We're going to spend 10 minutes now to frame this discussion. And I would like to introduce two colleagues to do that for us. The first, we will hear from Dr. Tony Swan, who is the Director of Development Economics at the Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade in the Government of Australia. And then we will hear for 5 minutes from Mr. Dirk Meyer, who is the Director General of Multilateral Development Policy, Transformation and Climate at the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. So thank you very much, colleagues. Dr. Swan, across to you.
Thank you, Joseph, and good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the challenge of data-enabled development. So I'll just begin by emphasising that data is not just numbers. It is the foundation of smart decision-making, effective policies, and real progress in development. Over the past decade, it has transformed the way we undertake challenges and measure impact, understand challenges. Yet for many developing countries, particularly in the Pacific and small island developing states, gaps in high quality, timely data have created barriers to financing, policy planning, and service delivery. Why does this matter? It matters because without reliable data, we cannot accurately track vulnerabilities, measure progress, or ensure development efforts reach those who need them most. Data gaps can reinforce inequality, making entire communities invisible in decision making. So as we engage in FfD4, it is clear data is central to financing sustainable development. If we are to achieve the 2030 Agenda, we need transparency, integration, and strong partnerships to align financial flows with it. Let me just start with Australia's efforts on strengthening data transparency and reporting so it works for development. Australia recognises that transparency builds trust, enables better decision making, and enhances accountability. It is a foundation for impact. Through initiatives such like the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IRT, and the launch of our new development transparency portal, AusDev Portal, we are making Australian development data more accessible, allowing partners to track funding and measure impact. But transparency is more than just donor accountability. It is about empowering developing countries to use data for their own priorities. Australia has invested in national statistical offices in the Indo-Pacific, strengthening data collection, analysis, and use. We know we need accessible, disaggregated, and timely data, particularly on gender, marginalised groups, and climate resilience. And we know how important it is to ensure global financing frameworks account for data gaps, so countries are not penalised for limited data reporting capacity. This is about using data for smarter decision making. To be truly effective, transparency needs to lead to action. It should improve national planning, financing, and development outcomes, not just serve as a reporting exercise. IRT plays a crucial role in ensuring development finance is trackable, accessible, and used effectively. I'll just briefly run through a few case studies just to have a sense of how we're trying to drive impact with data, but also some of the challenges involved. So we've been supporting development of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, the MVI. The MVI can be a game changer in shifting development support beyond income-based metrics. There is an increasing global understanding that income alone cannot accurately measure development, including because it obscures vulnerability and high costs. However, major data gaps have meant indicators like violence against women, land ownership, use of the Gender Parity Index, and maternal mortality were excluded due to a lack of data. This raises critical questions. Are the indicators we still use fit for purpose? For example, remoteness is traditionally measured by market access, but in the Pacific, it also impacts service delivery costs, economic resilience, and exposure to shocks. To fix this, we need stronger national statistical systems, better data sharing partnerships, and financing frameworks that acknowledge data limitations. I'd also like to speak about data challenges on climate and disaster risk in the Pacific. Just to say that the demands for climate and disaster risk information are rapidly growing in the Pacific, in part driven by the increasing number of extreme events driven by climate change and expanding population. However, persistent data deficiencies hinder efforts in this area. Now, we face challenges with limited vulnerability data, gaps in loss and damage data, We've got fragmented data, information management, and restricted access to data. I'll just quickly finish by just talking about going forward. The onus is on us to recognise that data is not just a tool for measurement, it's a driver of action, accountability, and impact. We have a unique opportunity to share best practices on how open data standards and transparency frameworks can improve development cooperation. We should demonstrate the power of open data at the national level, helping countries track financing, strengthen policies, and deliver results that improve lives. And lastly, there is an opportunity here to ensure open data standards are integrated into the FfD4 process, shaping a follow-up mechanism that strengthens global accountability and national action. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Swan. And I hand over to Mr. Mayer.
Yeah, thank you very much. Esteemed colleagues, dear friends, actually I'm starting a bit more spontaneously because I don't want to repeat what has been said, and I couldn't agree more on that. And I would like to start with my first statement saying that data in the era of fake news is a very, very political topic, an even much more political topic than it has ever been. And in that, I think also this group of experts should think that we probably need a bit more than the reliability on transparency, because even in our German debate on development policy last year, we had a debate where transparent data that were given to the public were misused for fake news and attempts to attack the sense of development policy. So we probably have to think, first of all, about the good basis, the good standards. In that, EAT is really a very good tool, and it is fitting very much in the idea of having a sensible outcome document and binding data transparency to action-orientated kind of framework. That's great, and that's fine. But we also have to think about political frameworks, how to use the data. First of all, to rely on data is very important when it comes to outcome, and in that it helps the policymakers. That's one important thing. You mentioned that the question of rebuilding trust is a question also for the domestic debates in your countries, and we have to have this as a tool and as a foundation, of course, to explain taxpayers what the outcomes of their money in development policy is. And with the data, we have to ensure that the data and its, how can I put this, its way of interpreting it is being built also on a transparent, clear, rational-based kind of communication. As you see in my argumentation, I'm still looking what the best ways are, but I think we have to really reach the next level in talking about data, in thinking about what we have to do to assure that our data are not being misused, or when they are misused, we have the right means to show at what stage they are misused. And that's something where we probably all have some difficulties in understand what is going on. But meetings like this and the follow-up should be used to create even more political, intellectual effort to find ways in that. So I just wanted not to repeat that, I want to put this point also on the table and help us to push forward our debate. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you very much for two very helpful framing statements there. And I really appreciate that you kind of set out together these ideas of, trust, accountability, and decision-making, but for impact. And one part of that is having the transparent data. The other is how we make sure that the narrative is shaped around that data in a useful and transparent way itself. And I also particularly appreciated the call for concrete steps and ways forward. So I hope very much we can now perhaps hear some ideas around that. So we will have 3 presentations from colleagues here around me. One from Yemsrach, and then I will introduce our other colleagues, Genevieve and Catherine, afterwards. So, Yemi.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Once again, thank you very much for this really lively conversation, and thank you for framing it so well for us to proceed in the next sessions of this, side event. Can I have the slide, please? Wonderful. Well, for those who might not know, IATI is the International Aid Transparency Initiative. You've heard it so many times already in this side event, but I really wanted to say a couple of things about this. We were created, we are here today after decades of effort of international commitments to transparency in data, open data. And we wouldn't have been here if it was not to the investment of every single one of you in the international development, both the providers of development cooperations and the users of development cooperation who have been members of IATI for a decade and pushing us in the frontiers. So IATI is a product of this decade of effort and investments. You might recall that we've been created in 2008 in Accra, Aid Effectiveness Conference, where we really been highlighted as a very important initiative to be established, and we were launched since then. 2011 was a very important benchmark I wanted to make. Since we moved away from aid effectiveness to development effectiveness agenda, we've been really anchored to serve the 4 principles of development effectiveness in 2011. Furthermore, in Addis Ababa Action Agenda 2015, we were reaffirmed that transparency of aid is a critical element of development to making development effectiveness happen and the SDGs being achieved. So that was another clear commitment. But then again, we are living in a world where we are not only working on development, but where crisis is also concurrently happening. And we have in 2016 reaffirmed as an organization that should be really taking humanitarian data as well during the Grand Bargain Agreement. So we also have now not only the custodian of development aid data, but also humanitarian data. Now we are here fast-tracked in 2025, looking out for your greater commitment and support for us to be present in the FfD outcome document to show stronger commitment for aid transparency in the next few years to come, if not decades to come. Now, next slide, please. So just for those who might not have come across us, we are an institution, an initiative, intergovernmental initiative made up of over 100 organizations as a member who set us out to do, to be a custodian of an open data standard and an open data platform. So we have these organizations who publish, generously publish, their good data in IATI using IATI data standard, and we make it available openly and freely to all to use IATI data. And thank you, the Honorable Minister, Assistant Minister, for demonstrating Liberia importing our data straight into their dashboard and being able to use it effectively in decision-making purposes. So our users of data are multiple governments of countries. It could be civil society organizations, academia, and name them. They are all been using it. And all those who are actually publishing data, like Australia, thank you very much again for your recommitment and your recent efforts in publishing, again, great data in IATI. So all of them use it. And the purpose of this is to make development effective. And that is the key. which would be helping us to achieve SDGs. So this is really the chain where we see ourselves contributing to the bigger agenda of Agenda 2013. Next slide, please. So as I said, we've made huge progress. Over 1,700 organizations published in IATI. This is a great progress. Congratulations all for making this happen. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to do this. And in this generation where we are really facing fragmentation of aid, the delivery of aid mechanism being really complex and difficult, there is no other solution than making the information available to the level of granularity, up to the level of activities, to the users of data, so that they are able to organize, coordinate, and make decisions effectively. Next slide, please. So, just a reminder, a quick reminder for all of us, development effectiveness principles, 4 of them. This is the one that we really uphold as we speak today. Country ownership, inclusive partnerships, focus on the result, which Joseph have touched upon, and transparency and accountability. I wouldn't go there right now, but I'll try and demonstrate how IATI uphold these 4 principles as we move along. Next slide, please. Here we are today. I wanted to say once again, we are very, very happy to stand in front of you to say that 2/3 of the ODA data that is being delivered is captured in IATI with the level of granularity that our countries are demanding on. Comprehensive, really activity level all the way down to the district level is being made available through our partners. Thank you for that effort, for giving us your data and trusting us with the data. 19 countries are using the data systematically. This is a great achievement for us. This is not the only thing we would say, but more is on its way. Countries are using it for national budget purposes. Countries are using it for coordinating development. Countries are using it for making partnership happen. So these are all effectively use of IATI data, and I'm really happy to report to say that this is a work in progress, and we hope we will serve every single country in the next few years to come. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of making inclusive development partnerships happen, my colleagues would be speaking a lot, and we have World Bank here with us today. They will speak on the aspect of how IATI data is helping to coordinate multiple partners to come together and serve food security and nutrition agenda. I would like to say that we in IATI are delighted to say that we are working with different partners, including organizations working on indigenous people who really need information and aid data, and then really looking into in what ways they have been the recipient of much needed support. We work with organizations that's very much keenly looking into land governance issues. So these are things that we really, IATI is facilitating going forward. So this is in relation to inclusive partnerships. Next slide, please. I know Joseph is looking at me, so I'm about to end. Now, in terms of results, please know that IATI is not all about finances only. We also have data in relation to results. So value for money analysis is made available and made possible now because we contain both finance and result data. Next one, please. I'm about to end it, Joseph. This is my almost final slide. Transparency and accountability. This is the heart of the matter. That's why we are here today. As we say that transparency is a work in progress because all of you have put so much effort and investment in making aid data transparent. But in terms of accountability, more work needs to be done. And the quote that I put out here from our Secretary General, where he really highlighted where we are in terms of multilateralism, which has been weakened over the years, and where he called upon mutual effort to rebuild trust, which really echoes the point that has been made earlier on by Honorable Assistant Minister. So I just would leave you with his quotes here, and if I may, really I count on your support going forward in making sure that the financing for development really looks into transparency and features it appropriately in the way we would like to see it. I really searched for words of transparency. It's been mentioned 17 times, but not in relation to development cooperation. I hope today we will be heard that within the effect of development cooperation, transparency as a fundamental principle must be recognized recognized in the FfD outcome document, and I call upon you and your support in that regards. Joseph, if you don't allow, if you allow me, I would call upon Minister to demonstrate how Liberia has been using it, maybe after everybody has presented, if that's okay with you.
Okay, before questions.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Yemsaraj. And you probably can't tell from looking at her, but I've known Yemi for 20 years, and she actually used to speak at twice that speed. So you did very well. Okay, thank you very much. So now, well, unfortunately, one of the times when we really need data is in times of crisis, right? And that's when having access to real-time, already available data is really critical. So we now have a presentation from our friends from the World Bank, from Ms. Genevieve Theodorakis, economist, World Bank Group, Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard, to talk us through. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? It sounds so quiet in here that you can't tell who can hear what. I know. That's a good sign. Thank you. Anyways, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Genevieve Theodorakis, and I'm an economist at the Agriculture and Food Global Department of the World Bank. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and many thanks to our colleagues at IATI for bringing us together for this great discussion. So today I'll be sharing insights on the bank's work with the Global Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard. But before I elaborate on the dashboard, I want to acknowledge the uncertainties of the international environment in which we operate and reiterate the crucial importance that all of you in this room are doing to advance global development efforts. To echo the words of my valued colleagues, our conversation with IATI and valued partners comes at a crucial time and presents us with an important opportunity to come together as a community, to collaborate and ensure accountability and impact around global development financing. So with that, let's turn to the Global Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard. I'll start by setting the scene with some high-level figures. Next slide, please. All right, excellent. So according to the latest edition of the Global Report on Food Crises, in 2023, around 282 million people were living in crisis conditions, which meant that people required urgent humanitarian assistance to be able to meet their basic food needs. And what's particularly concerning about this figure is the fact that we've been seeing the number of people living in these extreme conditions growing year on year. In fact, levels today are 2.5 times higher than they were in 2016 when these global figures were first published. And these numbers are on the rise due to a confluence of factors ranging from conflict and insecurity to worsening weather extremes and economic shocks. And in 2022, the confluence of the COVID-19 pandemic and the invasion of Ukraine led to a food crisis of truly global proportions. And I wish I could say that the situation showed signs of improving, but the reality is we're not headed in the right direction. And the incidence of famine, just as an example, is on the rise in devastating crises such as the Sudan and in Gaza. Thanks. So in 2022, as a global crisis was unfolding, we benefited from the leadership of the previous German G7 presidency, led by my esteemed panel member, Dirk Meyer, who partnered with the World Bank to launch the Global Alliance for Food Security to bring heightened attention to this urgent situation. And from this engagement, we launched the Global Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard. The idea of the dashboard is simple and rooted in a long-standing need in the ecosystem to find a way of consolidating the vast array of information that's available to us on food and nutrition security, and to put it in one place to support better decision-making. Access to quality data and the latest trends on topics ranging from early warnings to financing and programming is critical for food and nutrition security decision-making and effective crisis response. Better data can help us to anticipate food crises and effectively mobilize resources to affected areas. It also helps us to develop smarter and more cost-effective interventions that effectively mitigate risks and improve the resilience of food systems. That slide movement is excellent, thank you. By having all this information in one place, we not only help to defragment a very fragmented system, but we also bring our aid architecture and our decision-making into the 21st century. This will help us to implement a more systematic approach for getting ahead of these devastating crises instead of responding in an ad hoc manner. The Global Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard is our one-stop shop platform to support decision-making in the agriculture and food ecosystem. It brings together the latest global and country-level data from over 45 different indicators on topics ranging from food crisis severity, financing flows to food security and agriculture, emerging risks to the ecosystem, and potential measures to strengthen food systems. Great. So the dashboard is divided up into 5 sections, and for the purposes of today's discussion, I'd like to hone in on the action focus area, which tracks and shares information on global food and nutrition financing. Next slide, please. The action area was built in close collaboration with IATI and features a first-of-its-kind methodology to bring together all available food and nutrition security financing being mobilized across the ecosystem. This approach utilizes a methodology that's actually been developed to track responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. And our colleagues at IATI were instrumental in bringing this life to work. And a huge thanks to Stephen Flower in particular, the IATI Secretariat, and UNDP, of course. So the bank's collaboration with IATI has yielded several benefits. First and foremost, it forwards our understanding of global financial flows to food and nutrition security. As you can see from the visuals on the slide, we can break this data down by global, regional, and country level, ensuring that it's suitable for all types of audiences and fora. Secondly, it provides insights into what is being mobilized and by whom. And this is crucial for reducing duplication and maximizing the use of very limited resources that humanitarian and development partners have at their disposal. Last but not least, this data is also helping us to mobilize additional resources for the agenda. We can point to major funding gaps in the ecosystem, which we can use as part of our high-level engagements with partners to identify ways of filling these gaps. And I would say last but not least as well, I think that this data is going to be crucial to be able to help us demonstrate impact and be able to demonstrate accountability to our taxpayers. Thank you. So in terms of next steps, we'll be using IATI's methodology to actively support the bank's ongoing work to food and nutrition security crises. Specifically, we will be integrating a feature to help publishers to tag their data with more precision, which will help users of IATI data, like the bank, to find and track financing in response to specific initiatives. This will be particularly useful for tracking funding commitments to support the World Bank's preparedness plans for food and nutrition security. The preparedness plans work to identify FNS crisis risks as crises are emerging, instead of waiting for them to hit. And the plans will set up operational arrangements to respond to said crises before lives and livelihoods are lost. Using the tagging function, we will be able to track financial responses to these crises and access high-frequency development financing data in real time, data that does not exist anywhere else. This data tracking is already being put to use in Yemen and Somalia, where we are actively monitoring crisis risks to get ahead of any potential FNS crises on the horizon. We will also continue to promote the use of IATI's methodology among our data partners. In particular, we encourage countries and data partners to share their financing data in a standardized and a timely manner. The more that we can collaborate to share data on this crucial topic, the larger the impact that we can have to inform decision-making in the area of investments to food and nutrition security. Last slide, please. Thank you. So I'd like to just conclude by saying now more than ever, we need to work together to build a food secure future for ourselves and for future generations. For those of you who would like more information on how to use or contribute to IATI's data in the dashboard, we welcome the opportunity to engage with you after this session. But for now, thank you for your attention and looking forward to the session.
Super. Thank you so much. So that's fantastic. We're going to turn to our last speaker in a moment. But so we heard how IATI is very well poised to support financing for development. This was a lovely example of the data in use, but I think you also picked up there on the network effects, right? That the more that we're able to publish, the more useful it becomes. And I really appreciated emphasizing that IATI is also not standing still, right? You're evolving it, you're engaging with the team, making it work for us. So that's an invitation to everyone, I think. So thank you so much for that. But a feature of it, it's about open data, and it's interesting to understand why that's so important and also how you manage open data. So I'd very happy to introduce Katrin Frauscher from Open Contracting Partnerships, Deputy Executive Director, to talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. And yes, I think I'm the second to last speaker between you and the coffee break, so I will try to keep it short. Like my German-speaking colleague, I also like to just speak, so let's see how it goes. But yes, I'm here to talk to you about the power of connecting financing and aid data to procurement data. Because if you think about it, right, the way aid turns into the goods and services that people need, it often happens through procurement. Therefore, procurement is really important when you think about financing for development and what many of you are here to negotiate for or to advocate for. Procurement, it's a lot of money. Annually, it's $13 trillion that governments around the world spend to procurement. In many countries, it's 15% of their GDP. And even if you think about international development organizations, I think the World Bank in the last 5 years had $20 billion that flowed through procurement. So it is, when we think about domestic resource mobilization and international development effectiveness, which are two of the core themes that you are trying to promote to financing for development, you can't do that without better procurement. So how do you make procurement better? How do you connect aid and procurement data? You use open data standards and you digitize and connect the data to do so. And we at the Open Contracting Partnership, we host something that's called the Open Contracting Data Standard. Germany is one of the countries that actually publishes to the Open Contracting Data Standard. And it helps you to organize your information and tag your data. Because often, right, where we get lost, that we can't follow the money anymore and we can't make that jump from financing to procurement to services is because data are not tagged and you can't see anymore what a project is. So that is something that we would like to see much stronger, as Yemi said as well, in the financing for development outcome document, because open data, digitizing data, connecting data is definitely not there strong enough yet to be actually meaningful. The second thing that I would like to emphasize, what we heard a little bit about as well, is using country systems to process the aid and spend aid. I think globally, only about 30% of aid flows through national country systems, and a lot of it still runs through international organizations. If you're serious about building country capacity so that eventually they can have also strong systems that fight corruption, that deliver services for their countries, for their citizens, you have to invest in capacity building and process aid and financing to country systems. And we have one example, talking about examples in a crisis situation that is, I think, close to many of our hearts in Ukraine. We have been working in Ukraine since the Maidan Revolution, where corruption, caused a drastic change in how that country and that government looks like. And they put transparency up front to all of their budget and their procurement information. So when the war started and they were invaded, one thing that they already were able to do was to tag all of their war procurement, because they had enough data and enough of a digital system that they could say, we know what we are spending and buying to win this war. But then they went a step further, and they have this beautiful project called DREAM. and it's a digital reconstruction management system of Ukraine. It's a project that my organization is very proud to host and support, and it is a beautiful example of where international finance organization, the national government, and local governments all use this system to flow the budget through to rebuild the roads, the hospitals, and the kindergartens that are being bombed and destroyed. So one thing that you can do there is you can see that the Lithuanian government gave money, it went into the Ukrainian budget, it was allocated to a region, they're building a kindergarten, and now local communities there can monitor to see how the kindergarten is being rebuilt and which milestone it is reaching. Because that is, I think, also something that we don't often hear about is the communities, right? That they should have decision-making power about what's being built, where it's being built, how fast it's being built, and that they are actually getting what they need. And the DREAM project shows you that it's possible, and that even organizations like, the World Bank, the UN, and others can agree to this and do this. It's not impossible. It's maybe a dream, but Ukraine has shown that it can be done. So my ask for all of you, especially if you're going back into the big room to negotiate, is to ask for more open and connected data for aid and procurement, and to fight to process more aid through country systems. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And so this is what we would call traceability, right? In being able to see it kind of go all the way down. And I very much appreciated what you were saying there, Katarina, about community empowerment and community decision-making, right, as much as our decision-making. And, of course, strengthening national systems. So on that note, there we have an opportunity, I think, to hear from the Assistant Minister on the example from Liberia. Yeah. 5 minutes.
Is laid out in the way that you can assess the project based on what has been planned and what has been disbursed by sector over time, and also has the donor profile of all of the donors that are operating in Liberia. And you can go there and see exactly what are the specific activities that they are funding and what are some of the disbursement challenges. So for instance, looking at the African Development Bank, from the chart, we see that they are key funders of both the infrastructure sector and the energy sector. You can see what are planned and how disbursements flow. You can also track activity at the county levels, going down to organizations and disbursement. It's also linked to different sectors. Like we have 11 budget sectors, so each of the sectors, you know exactly which donor partner is funding each of the sector and which specific activities that they are funding. So here, for instance, health, based on the reports that's being generated, you know health is being funded heavily by USAID and the Global Fund, which also poses a severe challenge. So this data is used for analysis and to see exactly how we can try to ensure that programs are not duplicated by different partners. You come down at the activity level, you see each program that is being implemented within the health sector and at the county level as well. So that's how the project dashboard is being decentralized. It helps us for reporting. It also helps us during budget planning and implementation. In time past, all of our data was stored in the Excel format on somebody's computer. But now we have a systematic area where all of the projects are now synchronized. You can go there and get a live data to inform your decisions. So during budget preparation, we go and see which one of the donor partners are actually supporting which project. And it's from there we are able to align our domestic resources to ensure that we have an effective planning process. So thank you. This has been a very useful platform for us, And IT has been helping us. We also import their live data on the platform as well. In this platform, all of our donor information, they are all synchronized. It's somewhere that you can go to access handy data. It has made reporting easier for us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I've really liked in these presentations that we've seen real practical examples, right? And so I think what we're being asked for here is, you know, it's a win that's right in front of us, right? There's already this great work that's taking place, and it's like, how do we scale that? How do we make sure that that has a presence in the Financing for Development document? So I would like to very much appreciate all the speakers for getting us back on track. I'm very proud of you in terms of timing. Before I hand back to Yemi to introduce our closing speaker, we do actually have 5 minutes left if there are some burning questions. Okay, so let's take two. So if I go to the back there, the gentleman there next to Annalisa, and then I'll come to this lady, and then perhaps one question over here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all the participants. My name is Gerrit Haverkamp from the World Benchmarking Alliance, a proud reporter to IATI. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to pick up on the point that Dirk Meyer made about ODA and the pressure we face globally. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to use AIT not in the defense in terms of being transparent and accountable, but also in the offense in terms of telling the collective story about what we have achieved with aid, not just on a country per country level, but what we have collectively done. Because I think what we're facing right now is every time that there's a country where ODA is under threat, then we start to explain what ODA does. And I think you could really, really help us, I don't know who else would do it, to tell that collective story about what countries are doing together and achieving together, and help our politicians, our organizations, with the facts and the stories and the narratives to tell that story. I think that's kind of the other side of transparency and accountability, which I'm just going to call defensive, which is good, and we need to be. But there's also something that we can use as data in the offense, and I hope that there's a way of us working together on that. Thank you.
My name is Beth Vorenyuk, and I'm here with the Walking the Talk Consortium, which is looking at primarily ODA, but financing for women's rights organizations and feminist movements. And so 2 quick points, and thank you very much to the organizers and the panelists for this timely discussion. One is following up again on the point made by our colleague Dirk Meyer in terms of some of the challenges around transparency. And in this moment where we're seeing a backlash on women's rights, LGBTQ rights, one of the challenges we have in IATI reporting is vulnerability to attacks on activists. And so it's transparency is absolutely important, but we also have to look at the dangers that it can pose when we're funding human rights defenders, land defenders, and others who are facing increasing attacks. And the other point, in terms of tracking investments in gender equality, perhaps there's a need to look at the quality of the tagging and the marking. It's a very different kind of exercise than tagging a sector. And when we go to try to understand how much money is being invested and supporting gender equality objectives, which we're seeing there's a huge financing gap for SDG 5, it can be very difficult to actually track those numbers because there's a different interpretation of how this money is actually moving and whether or not it's actually having results that narrow gender inequalities. Thank you.
Super, thank you. I have one time, okay, the 2 gentlemen over here. I have time for one, or you can both go very quickly. So if you, and then, yeah, exactly.
Hi, my name is Aziz. I'm a civil society member, but especially work for children education. So I had a question from Joseph. You recognize UNICEF is very transparency. They're investigating their projects, but where I belong from, Pakistan, I saw many corruption in their projects. You guys giving the projects to the local organization, which is by refugees name or other rebuilding schools in the tribal areas, or supporting other logistics supports. But there is a lot of corruptions, and I never see nobody investigating. The money using from different, which is caused, like in the back, something similar problems, and they're taking money on the project of the name of the children, our rebuilding schools, or any other. And I like the IATI. Is there any access to the Pakistani, our Middle East countries data system? There, how much fund they're going to, like the donors donating, and how we can track this data, and how UNICEF can investigate the past projects in those organizations, and can we stop more that kind of organization who did not working and they're getting money? Thank you.
Okay, I'll come to that. Thank you. And then the next colleague.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and honorable speakers. My name is Liu Chen, and I'm representing Children and Youth International and speaking on behalf of the major group on children and youth. So it's been over 20 years since the 1995 Summit for Social Development, and we're making significant steps towards ensuring work, progress, and financial developments are made to support critical groups across the world. However, there remains a consistent underdevelopment and underfulfillment in the values of trillions of unmet aid debt towards the global south, which has hindered cultural, humanitarian, and socioeconomic growth. And there's a continued need to continue funding and support towards youth causes with more consistent, accountable funding to be directed towards NGOs, community-led organizations, and marginalized groups, including youth, women, indigenous peoples, and communities discriminated on work and descent. Impact-based information is also clearly lacked in those financial data, which does not reflect overall the cultural and the socioeconomic impacts that these have actually implemented in these communities. The youth of this world demands a necessity towards growth in steps in terms of financial regulation and pathway on accountability in the private and public sector, but also a framework where engagement and accountability is provided. There are hundreds of millions of youth who are at risk of food security, with 200 young people in youth-led organizations expressing and converging on a common agreement towards and call for accountability and a proper mechanism to ensure this necessitated action. This program is a voluntary data contribution program, and there does not exist a proper mechanism to enforce pledged funding without full data disclosure. The question I'd like to present for the panel, therefore, is whether the implementation and proposal for a continued approach to the International Aid Transparency Initiative would be to support a full mechanism that analyzes, presents, and ensures pre-existing UN conventions and pledges on international development cooperations, including a key non-fulfillment of the trillions of unmet aid debt towards the global south through the past decades, and of focusing on impact-based outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those. What I will do is I'll take the one on UNICEF, and maybe, Mr. Mayor, your name came up several times. If you wanted to respond to any of that on the collective story in particular, and then Yemi, I will hand to you to talk about how we protect sensitive data, and also in terms of the last piece on the analytics and the impact, if that's okay? Okay, so all for Pakistan, all UNICEF data is on open.unicef.org. You can see everything there. If you ever come across any evidence of any corruption, you go to accountability1@unicef.org and you report it, and it will be investigated. So that's my advice to you. Okay, Mr. Mayor.
First of all, your point made clear that the answer to misusing data, the answer is not being intransparent, but putting on the next level. And in that, of course, the question of outcome is also a debate that many of the donor countries also have inside their debates on future development policy. So that's exactly what I hope for, that we really be able to lift it on the next level, and that would be one of the next level. And it shows what you both said, putting these data in that way together, it helps us to construct a steering wheel, and also, you know, a board where we can see whether the outcome is organized or not. And if not, we can say to the public, well, we see the data, And we figured out that the ways we tried to make them were not right, and we have to, in an agile manner, try to find new solutions for that. So in that, we construct a narrative that any attempt to call people who are doing development policy as being a group of criminals is the real fake news.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for this very, very important point that you're making. Really, it's a very important point. Whilst we are all laughing about this great point being made, it's important that we take transparency to the next level, because it is not to hide information what is necessary. It's rather to deepen and advance our engagement with data and ensure that we really do justice, a judicious use of data. That's what we are asking for. So I really commend the issue that you're bringing in. This is not the first time that we've been hit by misinformation, disinformation. This has been the case since COVID-19 and the world really, which is digitally connected and socially connected. So we really are facing this unprecedented time. And I look up to organizations working on good governance, data security, to work with us to try and shape the future that we want in a judicious use of data. Having said that, a couple of points has been made, and I won't be able to answer all of them in the way I would have loved to do so. But I really wanted to say one thing. We have come a long way since IATI was established in 2008. We have rich data set, not only finances, but also results. But it's also an important factor I wanted to make, which I haven't been able to make earlier on in my presentation, is that we're living a digital revolution time, a data revolution time. We can now analyze data using AI to be able to generate insights, impacts, and we can tell the story which we haven't been able to tell, the collective story of aid, how we have come, how we've addressed vulnerability, how we've addressed food security, how we are actually reaching out the most vulnerable in suffering from HIV/AIDS, and so on and so forth. So we can do it, and we look forward to partner with all of you who are present here, who are listening online, so that we can actually make this happen. We tell the story as our colleague has highlighted. Now, that goes with impact as well. A colleague who's been highlighting from Pakistan, as well as the other colleague from the youth organizations, we can do this. We can be able to tell who has been receiving resources and who has not. In a better way, we can make redistribution of resources. So I think it is possible that we have the information, we can do that, and we can make it happen. Last point on data security and sensitive information. This is a very difficult question, I must acknowledge. And in this regards, I would like to say that, organizations who are voluntarily publishing in IATI data standard, they use their own disclosure policies in the way in which they want to disclose information to us. To an extent, there is that check and balance mechanism where information has been published in a way that no harm principle is respected. Going forward, even within IATI, we're developing our data policy, which hopefully we will be finalizing very soon. We'll be able to take into consideration this particular principle of do no harm and ensuring that all those who needed to be protected are protected accordingly. So this is with the little time I have been given, I could be able to say. But one last point I wanted to make before I go. We all spoke to say that transparency is key and it helps us to build the trust. But I would like to say that research are showing us that it actually creates the public support to aid. So if we are living this unprecedented time, let's use transparency to create support to aid. Thank you very much. Yes. Before we end this session, obviously, I think allow me to thank Joseph Barnes for great work done in moderating this session. I know we are running out of time, so now my last chance to do in this session is to introduce our esteemed guest, His Excellency, Mr. James Lawrence, Australia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations. He's been appointed for the United Nations since July 2003. He served in different capacities at a very high senior level and serving in multiple countries, including in Turkey, Israel, Brussels, and in Bangkok. I can't mention his entire rich career path, but allow me to welcome him to do the closing remark for us. Thank you, sir. Excellency, over to you.
Look, thank you very much, and I'm very conscious of time, so I don't need to give a big speech. What an inspiring and thought-provoking series of presentations we've had today. And I thought, thank you for our Liberian Assistant Minister, Germany, World Bank, UNICEF, other colleagues. It really has been a fundamental reminder that data is everything. Data helps drive decisions, but also data helps us be confident that the decisions we've made are the right decisions, or if in fact they're the wrong decisions, how we can redirect ourselves and change tack. And so when I reflect on Australia's experience in the Pacific, where we have a very substantial development assistance presence, very substantial development finance presence, data drives absolutely everything that we do, and we are confident that if we can ensure that the work that IIT is doing, but others in this room, to ensure that you have a proper database, and I took very much on board the notion we have to make sure that we have the right data, and we have to make sure that we're using data for the right purpose. So if you have mechanisms and frameworks actually to gather the data, but then you have mechanisms and frameworks to determine what we do with it, you can then be much more confident that you're on the right path. And my final reflection is, as we go into what is going to be a very complicated and difficult financing for development discussion in the coming months, but I think in the coming years, the reality is we know there will never be enough public funds from developed countries to come close to the development finance needs worldwide. There simply is not enough money, and you can reform the World Bank as much as you like, but that will not close the gap. And so we have to be much more data-driven in terms of our engagement with the private sector, with private financial institutions, and it's really only going to be that engagement and the data which underpins it, which is ever going to help us provide the finance and support necessary for the climate energy transition, for the meeting of the SDG goals and the multiple other things that we know is desperately required in the developing world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. I know we are really running out of time, so I wanted to thank all of you present today, online and in person, and Excellencies, distinguished guests. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.